The portal is spinning, and it has given Nebraska a quarterback. Let's talk about that.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the number one sports podcast network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase.
All right, welcome. It is Sunday. We are recording this after a weekend, or I guess a few days here to observe the transfer portal and the comings and goings. I'm Connor Happer here from 1620 The Zone, Mitch Sherman from The Athletic, and the first domino seems to have fallen with Notre Dame quarterback Kenny Minchey committing to the Huskers, and he assumes to be, at least in the strong mix, to be Nebraska's starting quarterback next year. So we got stuff to talk about.
That is right. Yeah, there's going to be a quarterback battle, it would seem, at Nebraska. We don't know everything about the quarterback situation. We won't for a couple of more weeks, at least the identity of everyone who's going to be in that room. But we know one big name in that room now is Kenny Minchey, the 3-year Notre Dame backup who is now committed and soon to be signed with Nebraska as the Huskers' first ad of this portal season. So a little bit of just laying this out for you right here. For the next 2 weeks, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start every podcast with the news of the moment, your portal headlines, or if it's not the news of the moment and there's other big things happening in Nebraska football, we will at least get you the portal news somewhere before the first break, because this is like an entire season of recruiting in 10 or 12 days. But it's actually more consequential than an entire season of recruiting, because you are adding and losing starting caliber players, not high school seniors who are 2, 3, or 4 years away from making an impact in the program. This is a sprint to January 16th. Who committed? We'll tell you that. Who's visiting? Who left? Who might leave? And then where do the numbers stand, which is always going to be something to watch. We will tell you that in the third segment of this show. But the headline today, Connor, is that Kenny Minchey is in and Keona Davis is out, among others, to announce their departures on Sunday. Larry Tarver, the DB from Miami, Houston Kahina-Torres, the offensive lineman from Hawaii, and on Saturday, it was DBs Ramir Stewart, Braylon Prude, and then defensive lineman Dylan Parrott. So a lot going on in the Nebraska football portal landscape.
Yeah, we had a chance, a little bit of a chance, just to give our initial thoughts on this, because it seemed like this is the way we were headed on Friday. And I think, in a couple of days of just trying to understand where people's heads at are on this, I think there is still a fair amount of skepticism that Kenny Minchey has not been a starter. Yeah, a fair amount of skepticism that Kenny Minchey has not been a starter in his college football playing career so far. And, and the way it was, sort of laid out for the public when his commitment was announced on Sunday was Nebraska landed one of, if not their top target at the quarterback position. And I think that is the truth. And then people wondered, wait a minute, top target? Like, that guy's never played before. What's going on here? And so I think a lot of questions sort of arose that way. I am not worried about it in particular, but I'm curious to hear what you think about it, Mitch.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at it. I mean, you can be a glass half empty guy and say he hasn't proven it at the college level. And Nebraska, with the position that it's in as a program coming off of consecutive 7-win seasons, needs to go right now and add a quarterback who is experienced in winning games at the highest level of the sport. And that's not the direction that it chose to take. And it didn't necessarily pursue those kind of quarterbacks. And I still think there's another quarterback out there for Nebraska to add, but that's not going to be somebody who has been a starter at the P4 level. The fact that that's one thing we know for certain with the addition of Minchey is that the aim for Nebraska now is to have Minchey and TJ Lateef, and things have still got to shake out for TJ Lateef. He says that he wants competition, that he likes competition. He embraces competition. That's what we saw from him in his first year at Nebraska, and he's getting paid well. That's always a factor. It's a huge factor. It's something we should not overlook in these discussions, is the fact that these players are getting paid. I would say both of these two, Lateef and Minchey, in the 2026 season with the contracts that they will have signed, are going to be getting paid between $500,000 and $1 million a piece. Like, that's just the market for that kind of a player. So that needs to be taken into account, because, hey, TJ Lateef may not love the fact that Nebraska added somebody who's going to be right there with him, potentially even a favorite over him going into spring practice, but he's also getting paid very well. And I think Nebraska will add another quarterback and still stay under the total amount of dollars that it paid Dylan Raiola with the 3 that it potentially has on scholarship. I believe that the next quarterback you will hear added to the mix for Nebraska is going to come from a lower level of football. Somebody who is upgrading his pay in a significant way and is coming to Nebraska for just the opportunity to be able to be included in the discussion. So that's kind of where things are at in the quarterback position. Dog.
It's making the dogs bark, man. It's getting people going.
But what do you think? Like, what's going to be your take on Kenny Minchey, like as a quarterback, not necessarily like how he got here or what it means for the position at large?
Well, I think the approach and the environment in which he walks into shapes sort of how people feel about him right off the bat and the first impression. And I think people are going to have a hard time getting over the fact that he hasn't been a full-time starter yet, and they'll wonder, okay, well, do you have enough money? And I think the answer to that is still, Nebraska is fine to compete in the category of guys that they feel like they can go after and pay them. But as I always like to remind people right around this time of year, it's about that, and Nebraska's competitive in that space, but it's about winning, and it's about where you can go and you can find a place. So I don't know how many shots Nebraska took at some of the higher guys in the list, but I don't think they would have been able to get any of them. And so I don't mind the idea of going to, a guy who's really talented, Elite 11 guy, nearly won the quarterback battle at Notre Dame this year over CJ Carr. It was neck and neck right at the end of things, and then giving him the reins to do his thing in your offense. And there is going to be some learning with that. There is going to be the adjustment to not only being the quarterback and starting all of the games, but also, experiencing what it means to be the starting quarterback, especially at a place like Nebraska and all those different things. And I do think it'll be Minchey at the end of the day. And so I think that's okay. And you're willing to live through it going in through 2026 and looking ahead to 2027. If everything, stays on track, you could put together a picture that says, we're going to be really, really good in 2027, or we're going to really go for it in 2027. I know that's a really hard thing for people to hear. You're not punting on 2026, but it's really, really important, to get those feet underneath you. Nebraska just doesn't have a great sense of direction at the moment. And so getting young players who have years of eligibility on their tracker is an important thing for me. And I think they did that with this.
There are 4 quarterbacks left playing in college football on the cusp here of the CFP semifinals Thursday and Friday of this week. All 4 arrived at their current schools as transfers. That's just the way it goes in college football today. 2 had starting experience at previous Power 4 programs before they got to their schools this year. 2 did not. So Dante Moore came to Oregon from UCLA, where he was he was not a starter, and Trinidad Chambliss, being the total outlier in the group, came to Ole Miss from Division II Ferris State. And then, of course, you have Carson Beck at Miami, who was a starter at Georgia, and Fernando Mendoza at Indiana, who was a starter at Cal. So it's 50-50 on the way that it worked for the four quarterbacks at CFP semifinalists this year. And I'm not saying that like that's what Nebraska's aim is for next season, but it's Nebraska's aim is to be successful. And those quarterbacks are running successful programs. And I think if you extrapolate that out to like the entirety of college football, that's generally going to be what you find, is that about half of the quarterbacks who are leading successful programs are going to be doing it as transfers, or maybe they're not transfers, but they're in their first year at that school. And then the other half have been around and have done it at the Power 4 level before. So experience is not like the prerequisite that you absolutely need to be good in college football, like it is in the NFL.
A lot of people, Mitch, had the expectation that, that Nebraska was in a place where they, because Rule talked about the money, and he's like, hey, we're going to be able to go out and do this and this and this and this. And that's not the direction they went.
Spend the money on defensive linemen, spend the money on offensive linemen, spend the money on having a quarterback room that is in a situation so that if Minchey isn't the guy, or that he ends up getting hurt like Nebraska starter did this year, that you don't have to go to somebody who is a true freshman in his first real college football action. Like if you have three who've all got something under their belt going into next season, then I think you're immediately in a better spot than where Nebraska was in 2025.
And like I said, keep in mind, I think that this is about how many years you want that player to be in that position. And I think it was key for Nebraska to have a guy who's going to be your starter for 2 years, in my mind. But also, like I said at the very beginning, I do think it's about, what you could attainably attract at this moment. It's just, you have to admit that to yourself. Nebraska, it's going to be really hard for them to pitch to a guy who, just won 10 games this year at a Power 5 school to be like, hey, come be our quarterback, because we're going to take it to the next level. That clearly isn't happening. So Nebraska has to build that piece of it first to make it an attractive part. Look at Indiana. I mean, they could have had anybody they wanted. Indiana's been in the playoff 2 years in a row. They might win a national championship this year. They got everybody in the country lining up at this point. Josh Hoover is going to be their quarterback next year from TCU. They're going to get the running back from Boston College. I mean, they could put together an all-star team if they wanted to. Nebraska doesn't have that kind of thing to attract. We don't have to compare everything to Indiana, but it's money is one thing, but winning is the biggest part. Winning and having an identity, and Nebraska's got to start from scratch on that.
What would Kurt do? It's the new comparison for every move in every aspect of college football, especially if you're a Big Ten team that's struggling to win and watching Indiana move closer to a national championship. All right, there's plenty more to discuss about Kenny Minchey and everything that's been going on with Nebraska and the transfer portal. Let's come back after this and get into it.
But first, a word from FanDuel. Fridays feel a little bit different because the NBA is back. FanDuel's making your Fridays even better. It's called NBA Happy Hour each Friday from 5 to 6:30 Central. Appointment viewing for both the NBA and for you because it's NBA Happy Hour with FanDuel. You open the app during Happy Hour, and it's going to bring you something new every single week. Boosts, bonuses, surprises, whatever it might be in between. So get there on time. Be ready for this slate of games to tip off on Friday night in the NBA. Check for the weekly specials before tip off, and you are ready to roll. Check the FanDuel app. See what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour each Friday, 5 to 6:30 or 6 to 7:30 Eastern. If you're out there, little basketball, little action, a whole lot of Friday energy. The NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
Thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today, and thanks for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. All right, we're talking about Kenny Minchey. Let's get into some of the nuts and bolts of this new Nebraska quarterback. So he's got 2 years of eligibility, as we've gone into. He's 6'2", 208 pounds, former 4-star prospect in the class of 2023. out of Hendersonville, Tennessee, which is the one-time home of Johnny Cash, Roy Orbison, Conway Twitty, Kelly Clarkson, and yes, Taylor Swift.
Whoa. Hello, darling. That's big time stuff. He's a country music star in a football player's body. What is going on?
We looked this up because we were curious with the name Kenny coming out of Hendersonville, Tennessee, if perhaps he was part of a country music dynasty, if his parents named all of their children country music type names, like he had a brother named Waylon and a sister named Dolly, but that is not the case. He has two siblings, Kayla, his sister, and Kaysen. So I believe that Kenny, or Kenneth Jr., as it appears is the case, was not named after the country music stardom that exists around him, but he is from a suburb of Nashville. He's got a strong arm. He's been involved in a quarterback competition before, losing out in August at Notre Dame to CJ Carr. Minchey was committed to Pitt before he flipped to Notre Dame in 2022, and he was recruited in that cycle by none other than Dana Holgorsen, who was at Houston at that time. And he's an athletic, mobile quarterback, fitting what Nebraska wants to do with the identity of its offense here moving forward past the 2025 season.
And he doesn't appear to be, he doesn't appear to be a runner first. That just appears to be part of his.
He's
game.
not running the option.
Yeah. He on tape, there's limited stuff of him at Notre Dame because of how limited he's played over the last 3 years. But in high school, there's a lot there. But he looks polished to me. I mean, I don't think that, obviously you can't know the whole picture. You can't know the whole story until he starts a couple games or whatever it might be, but he looks like a polished quarterback. I like the release. He makes good sound decisions seemingly with the football. There's only so much you could tell with the tape and all that stuff. But this was, pretty clearly the guy that Dana Holgorsen and crew wanted to go after. There's a reason for that. And so, Nebraska on paper here got their guy, and we'll see how it looks.
So what do you think this means for TJ Lateef?
Well, I think, I don't think he's going to be the starter next year. I don't know.
What does it mean for him over the next 2 weeks? Does he look in the portal now? Is he set on Nebraska, getting paid well? He's got 4 games of experience under his belt. Wants to compete, wants to be a part of this in the spring. Do you test the market? Do you look at things? What do you do if you're TJ Lateef?
I don't know I don't know what TJ Lateef would do, where he would leave here and be a better, where he would leave Nebraska and be in a better situation than he is currently in. I mean, he's got a chance to win the starting job next year. I don't love his chances at this time, and he's played here and people think highly of him and they know what he can do. He would be walking into another situation at another Power 5 school where nobody knows what he could do, and he's probably not the starter because the quarterback carousel has turned already. So no, I think you throw him in the bowl with everybody else, and you kind of see what happens. He's probably, I don't know. I can't imagine that he is in love with this, but Nebraska was always going to take.
It was inevitable. I mean, we knew Nebraska was going to go after a quarterback. Yeah. I mean, it could have been worse if Nebraska would have went out and gotten somebody who had been a 2-year starter at another school. Worse for Lateef, I say. And I don't even know if he views it as worse. Just it could have worsened his chances, lowered his chances to come out in August or go into preseason camp as the guy. I do think that Nebraska is going to characterize this and legitimately play it out in spring, whenever spring practice is held. And you got to look at the OTAs as well as a period for these guys to go out there and get after it and compete with each other. And I'm sure you'll hear from Dana Holgorsen that he's going to pick, or Matt Rule's going to pick the quarterback who's best, best suited for it, best prepared. So it's important, I think, that Nebraska started off its portal class with a quarterback, because now you have focus and you have some, much like the 2027 class started off with Trey Taylor as the point man, and then he can go be a gatherer for Nebraska, a peer recruiter. You're going to get that with Kenny Minchey. I imagine that he'll be talking to linemen as they come in on visits. It remains to be seen how much Nebraska is going to go after wide receivers in the transfer portal. Some of that will involve if Nebraska's returning, wide receivers who have eligibility opt to return. Nobody from that position has entered the portal yet. And I would think that Minchey, in addition to Lateef, will be involved in helping Nebraska lure a running back, somebody who is going to be immensely important to the success of the Nebraska quarterback, no matter who it is taking those snaps next season.
Yeah, that, and I think like I said, the quarterback carousel just turned early, right?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of happens before everything.
It's no different
else.
Than recruiting.
Yeah. Exactly. And so it's good that Nebraska, can kind of fit the pieces around him, like you just said.
Yeah. All right. On the downside of Sunday, Nebraska lost Keona Davis. Promising defensive lineman, 2 years in the program. He is the first of these post bowl game entries to really open your eyes and go, okay, that's not ideal. Someone who undoubtedly projects as a starter down the line now at another school. Although Keona Davis did go into the portal or make plans to go into the portal last year, and then Nebraska gave him a bigger offer, and he chose to come back to Lincoln. I don't see this one. I don't think that's a card you play twice. I don't think that Davis ends up picking up a bigger. I think he's got his offer from Nebraska, and he's going to now likely go get a bigger one from another school that sees in him what I think we all see in him, and that's the ability to be a dominating defensive lineman, pass rushing type of player, someone who could go to another school in a Power 4 league and make the kind of impact that Prince Will Umanmielen did this year in turning into Ole Miss's top pass rusher.
Yeah. I think that's the path. I mean, that's what he would want to happen. And the defensive line / defensive tackle, like whatever you want to call it. Keona Davis is as much of a defensive tackle, more of like an edge guy.
He should be more of an edge guy. He wasn't this year.
Right. So that's a piece of this. That market is, you can make some money there. There's not a whole lot of guys who have played a lot, especially at the Power 5 level. Like Keona Davis has, I guess, at this point. So he's got that on his side. I just I hesitate to say that this is like this earth-shattering thing, just because I just don't know. Like, I mean, to your point just there, like, I don't know what Nebraska would have ended up doing with him. I don't know what he would have ended up becoming. But also we've seen some good things from him. I don't know that I see like stardom coming for Keona Davis.
In the right situation, I think it can happen. And Nebraska wasn't the right situation. Certainly not this year. You could say what he did as a true freshman and just getting his feet wet, getting some experience, getting acclimated to the sport. It was fine. It was on schedule. This year was not on schedule. This was the year where Keona Davis was supposed to blossom and supposed to be someone who flashed fairly often in not like he wasn't going to be NFL ready in anyone's calculations by this time in his career. But I expected more to happen with him in 2025. And I will say, I think this is part of the damage that dates all the way back to what's been going on for Nebraska defensively since July of 2024, when Evan Cooper left the program and Matt Rule hired John Butler. And John Butler influenced the defense in ways that in part led Tony White to make a decision after the 2024 season to leave Nebraska for a lateral job at Florida State. And then Rule promoted Butler and asked him to stick with a defense that was something like a hybrid of the White system and the way that Butler impacted it in 2024. And it all ended disastrously in November of 2025, just 2 months ago. And then Butler was fired right after that. And then after the Las Vegas Bowl, Matt Rule admitted in front of the media and everyone else that he asked Butler to run a system that John didn't necessarily prefer. And I think part of the reason that it didn't work for Keona Davis is because the defensive linemen were either out of position or not coached up. And in the case of Davis, it was probably both.
Yeah. 406 snaps they had him for on the defensive side this year, which would rank which would rank second amongst all defensive linemen, only behind Williams Winery. So he was out there a lot.
Yeah.
Van Poppel right next to him in snaps, Cam Lenhart right next to him in snaps, and then McCullough is right down there as well. So they only had so many guys that they could lean on this year. He was one of them. But like you said, I completely agree with everything you just said. They, it was tough for them to figure out what the right spot for development for these guys were, because they were always scrambling to try and figure out how to patchwork whatever hole they had on any given week on the defensive line. It was not a situation for development.
I look at him and saw him in practice as a true freshman, and it didn't seem hard to figure out where I thought that he belonged on a defense, and that was lined up as a wide edge coming off of the line with a head of steam and giving an offensive tackle all kinds of problems staying in front of him as Keona put his sights on a quarterback. And that's very rarely the place that we saw him positioned at Nebraska in certainly in his sophomore season. So I understand it's a matter of need in personnel, and Nebraska was short on traditional interior linemen. So some players had to play out of position because you had to put somebody there, but it all comes back to the way that your roster was put together and managed, and the kind of development that the players received. And, nothing about what happened with the defensive front in 2025 is going to go down as
100%
as notably good in the history of Nebraska football.
If you're playing guys out of position, it's only a note to everyone that you didn't do enough in other places to have those spots ready. And then, so you're playing some of your most able players and giving them roles that don't fit them. And that's not good for them. It's not good for Nebraska. It's not good for them. So it was a mess this year, and they are starting from scratch along that defensive line. Let's take a quick timeout. We'll come back. We'll get to the numbers and a little bit more when we return.
Okay, a message right now for you from Gametime, because there's nothing like the college football postseason, and there's still some of the postseason left. And maybe you have an itch to go to a game. There are a couple of them this week. There's one down the road, the national championship game. Being right there in the middle of it all, it beats everything. The energy, the moments that you remember forever. But if you want to get tickets to those college football playoff games, well, that can be frustrating. No more with Gametime. It gives the advantage back to the fans. Gametime is the easiest way to unlock college football tickets and the experiences that go along with it in just a few taps. The app's incredibly easy to use. You can go from browsing to buying tickets in just minutes. You can use the zone deals feature where Gametime picks the seats after you pick the section, and then you save on the money side of it. Know the prices up front without the fees. It makes the process stress-free. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today.
All right, numbers, as we welcome you back here to the Locked On Nebraska podcast, something we're going to do when Nebraska has additions and subtractions. So here's where they're at right now after Keona Davis goes into the portal, and assuming that he stays there, that's what we'll do for those guys. 17 now departures, non-scheduled departures after the 2025 season. They were at 106 to end the year. So 17 after the season have left. Then you're at 89. 106 minus 17 is 89. You brought in 10 freshmen, which gets you up to 99. And then you've added Minchey, Mr. Minchey at quarterback, Kenny, to get you to a square 100.
That's where Nebraska's at on Sunday night. I imagine by the time you were listening to this podcast, it could be changed. It could go up a number. It could go down a number. So Nebraska can have a roster in 2026. I wish we knew the exact number, but it can be somewhere in the range of 120, because you get 105 players. That's the limit. the new NCAA limit. But you, on top of that, can add all of your designated non-counters from back in the summer. And that was the result of the House versus the NCAA case. We don't know who Nebraska's non-counters were in the 2025 season, but we know there were 20 of them on the team because Nebraska had 125 players. So if, and this is not legit, but if the 19 seniors were all non-counters and they're all gone now, then Nebraska could have 106 players in 2026. I would imagine there's probably 5, like just roughly speaking, between seniors and then that group of 17 who have already left the team. 5 might even be a little high for how many of the non-counters have left the program to this point. And if at the end of the portal period, you've lost 5 of your non-counters, then Nebraska could be at 120. We'll just say, for the purpose of estimating, that the roster is going to be somewhere around 120. They may choose to go lower. They may not go to the limit in 2026, but as they lose players and add players, you can keep that in the back of your head. It's not an issue for Nebraska right now. Like, where they're at with numbers is not an issue. They've got all the room that they need, essentially, to start adding pieces immediately. And it started with the quarterback. Where's the next place you go? What do you want to see Nebraska do next in the portal? Because these things are going to come fast and furious.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know that it has to be like the next thing. But it would be a great tone setter for Nebraska, just as far as how things feel, to get one of the big, trench ads, whether it be offensively or defensively on the line. It would just, like I said, you get the quarterback and it feels like a tone setter. You get somebody along those offensive and defensive lines, something that, people have been really thirsty for in Nebraska. You could see it by watching Nebraska play football that they need. So that wouldn't be a bad way to start things as you continue on in like the post Minchey adding, era.
Yeah, I think the offensive line, when this all shakes out and we look at the total number of transfers who are added to Nebraska, or the whole list, like the portal class for Nebraska, I think the offensive line is probably going to be the place where there are the most players added. And Nebraska's already had Brendan Black from Iowa State in on a visit. You're going to see the coaching additions for Nebraska up front on offense with Jeep Wade from Georgia Tech and Lonnie Teasley from South Carolina play a big role in the players that Nebraska brings in, at least on visits. And then it's on the staff and the program to close on those visits. But there are multiple players from both of those schools already in the portal, or not already, but in the portal for Nebraska to go after, and they're actively recruiting players from Georgia Tech and South Carolina. Now, I do think that it needs to be said that Nebraska can't just settle for getting the players that are connected to coaches on the staff. They're 1-for-1 so far. Minchey has a connection to Dana Holgorsen. Nebraska's a place. It's in the Big Ten. It has a lot of money. It doesn't need to limit itself in a way where, well, all of the ads have to be connected to Jeep Wade or connected to Lonnie Teasley or connected to Rob Orich, but you're going to get started that way. There are several defensive players from San Diego State who are also in the portal. Now, I did see a report this afternoon, I believe it was from On3, that Ryan Henderson, who was a high impact defensive end from the Aztecs, has canceled his Nebraska visit and seems to be off the table for the Huskers. But Owen Chambliss, Trey White, Dwayne McDougal, others are still out there with San Diego State experience who could be a part of this Nebraska defense with Rob Orich and Roy Manning as the defensive ends coach. Yeah,
Chambliss looks like Nebraska's in the best shape with him at this point, just reading the tea leaves. I was in Lincoln today doing the women's basketball game, and they had the stadium rocking, and I thought, is Nebraska hosting a college football playoff game today? No, they are not, but they were hosting several visitors, and the highlights were on the video board. So this is gonna be quite the next 2 weeks here. The sprint hits you fast. Now, a lot of what Nebraska did to prepare themselves for these 2 weeks has been huge. Like Rule talked about at the bowl game a lot, what Pat Stewart has done, and you'll see the fruition of that this week. So it's maybe not as much of a sprint to them as it feels like to us, because things have been set up maybe a little bit for a while. But yeah, we're gonna move fast, that's for sure.
So Rule's back from Vegas. We can confirm that.
I don't know. I don't know. I did not see Matt Rule. I just saw the video board, and the video board works and the sound system works. I think
he's back from Vegas. A thought went through my head after we joked about that on our Saturday mailbag about how we just needed a couple of days vacation after the season as the portal opened. It's possible that part of his reason for staying out there, and a lot of the Nebraska roster stayed in Vegas, at least the players who are 21. Stayed out there for a day or two. You had basically a free vacation, at least the air travel side of it. So why not? What it could have been for Rule was an opportunity for him to meet with some candidates, or a candidate to coach the Nebraska defensive line, or at least have some time to talk to somebody who could be Nebraska's defensive line coach. I think it's essential for Nebraska to get a defensive line coach, that situation sewn up pretty quickly here, like very quickly here, maybe Monday, as far as quickly here, so that as the Huskers are pursuing D-line portal players, those players can know and see and meet on campus, or at least talk to on the phone, who will be coaching them in 2026. So expect something there, I would say, in a short period of time.
Yeah. And before I let you go here, with that all being said, expect maybe podcasts to be dropping at varieties of different times.
We'll come to you when we need to, as at least as far as it fits our schedule. We of course have some other obligations with our other work, but yeah, we did this one on Sunday night because of Kenny Minchey, and when there's news, we'll jump on the podcast machine and bring it to you. So maybe not the normal schedule, but the pods will be there, and we'll be talking in your faces or in your ears about everything that's going on in the transfer portal here over the next 2 weeks.
There will be pods. All right. Thanks for joining us today. Like we said, make sure you come back tomorrow. Follow us on all the social medias, Locked On Nebraska. You could find us there. If you're watching on video, we're going to send you over to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel, and on audio, we would appreciate it if you made your second listen Locked On College Football. We'll talk to you soon.